Freedom is a word thrown about by a lot of people, but what does it mean in practice? How free are you? In broad terms, there are two main forms of freedom that were defined by the philosopher Isaiah Berlin. He called them negative and positive liberty. I'm going to cover negative liberty in this video and look at positive liberty in another film. Negative liberty can be represented as an area within which we are free to act without constraints and where we're relatively free from interference. Now, if you had total freedom, there will be absolutely no limits to what you could do and when you could do it. And this might sound appealing until we realise that everyone else would have the same level of freedom. And this would mean that the biggest and strongest would get the most resources. After all, how are you going to stop them? So absolute freedom for everyone would ironically result in more freedom for the strongest and less for the weakest, which is why, wherever we live in the world, we accept limits to our negative freedom. So the question becomes not whether we should have limits to our negative freedom, but what those limits should be. John Stuart Mill, a 19th century philosopher, advocated the harm principle as a guide. You should be free to act unless you harm others. This sounds straightforward. But as you can imagine, this definition rests upon what we think is harmful. Now, it's quite clear that if I attack you, I am harming you. But what about when I drive my car? Am I potentially harming your health by driving too fast? Or am I indirectly harming your health by polluting the air or by adding to global warming? To take another example, how much negative freedom is desirable when it comes to countries being able to trade freely with each other, with only minimal taxes and regulations? Now, some think it's a good idea because it creates thriving businesses and opens markets to new products and services. But other people argue that it should be restricted, because allowing cheaper goods and services from overseas might be detrimental to employment in the home country. And how much negative freedom should you have to work in other countries? The advantages might include the ability to work overseas and the fact that you might bring new skills to your new country. Others might argue that freedom of movement limits job opportunities for indigenous communities, drives down wages and stifles the need for employers to train their own workers. And what about constraints on where you can go and when you can go there? This was hypothetical in many countries until 2020, when the emergence of COVID-19 saw the introduction of restrictions on movement and behaviour that you might not accept in other times. But what if COVID-19 never goes away? To what degree are you happy for your location to be shared for the protection of yourself or others? And is that making you less free? The ultimate example of constraining someone's negative liberty is, of course, slavery. Here your freedom has been taken away completely, and you become the property of another person. This form of constraint has been around for thousands of years and unfortunately is not a thing of the past. Today people are being enslaved and transported around the world to do things that they would not choose to do willingly. So in summary, negative liberty can be represented as an area within which we are free to act without constraints and where we're relatively free from interference. And for many people, this area of negative freedom should be as large as possible because they argue that humans prosper when given the maximum amount of negative freedom that is possible. But some people have objections to this idea of negative liberty, arguing that whilst we might be free from interference, if we don't have the right skills and resources, we're not truly free. In their sense, true freedom comes when we're free to realise our own potential. Now, this is called positive liberty, and I will look at this in a separate video. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and subscribe now so that you never miss any of my future posts.